In this lesson, we're going to learn about the most important and fundamental tool or technique of IB English analysis, both Langlit and literature, and it is diction. Okay, now what does this mean? What is this weird word that looks like dictionary but isn't dictionary? What does diction mean? It simply means word choice. The specific words that a writer or author deliberately chooses to use in a piece of writing. That is diction. Diction simply means choosing words. Now, you're probably a little bit confused still, but you've actually used diction. You've actually chosen words in your everyday life when you're texting someone or when you're writing something in a notepad. There's probably 3 words for that particular spot that you could use, but you choose one of them because it makes the most sense or it achieves the particular meaning that you're after. That is diction. That is word choice. Now let's look at it in the context of analysis for, say, a paper 1. How would you use diction in a sentence? The writer's use of emotional diction in line 5 illustrates. That's an example of how you might use it, and the religious diction in communion and confession suggests. Now, if you're switched on, you'll notice a particular pattern in how we use the word diction in a sentence, but we'll go through this in a second. All right, so now the problem is obviously everything on a page in an exam, in a text, technically counts as diction, doesn't it? Everything, all the words, they count as diction. So the problem is obviously we can't analyze all of them. And that's why we have 2 simple rules for analyzing diction. Number 1, never analyze boring words. And number 2, the opposite, always analyze interesting words. And so the question is, how do we actually tell if a word is interesting or boring and therefore not worthy of analysis? And to figure this out, we need to know about 2 things. So a word has 2 properties. One is a denotation. That is the dictionary meaning, the literal meaning of the word. So if you look up the word gold in the dictionary, the denotation would be that entry. Connotations are something different. So let's go down. Let's continue through this gold example to really illustrate this. Now, the denotation of gold, the word gold, is a yellow precious metal, the chemical element of atomic number 79. All right, that's super boring, isn't it? Obviously, to us, there's a lot more meaning to gold, the word, than just its boring denotation. The word gold instantly makes us think of things like wealth, money, luxury, prestige, royalty, quality, beauty, perfection, and big fat Rolexes. It's these ideas, these feelings, impressions that we naturally associate with certain words. These are called connotations. They are different from the literal meaning, the denotation. Denotation is that dictionary meaning. Connotation is how we think and feel about that thing, and it's not necessarily related to its actual literal meaning. So there's a big difference. And in analysis, we care a lot about these associations, about these connotations. So how do we use connotations in a sentence? Well, we often use it as a verb in the form of connote or connotes. A common mistake that students make is they think connotates is that verb form. It is not. It is actually not a real word, so definitely don't use that. And connote in a sentence means basically implies. It's a similar meaning to implies. So let's look at some examples in a sentence. The connotations of neglect portray the squalid conditions of the town. All right. And gold connotes luxury and wealth. That's the verb format. Cool, so now let's look at an actual real example of analyzing diction. Say we've got this short quote, "The town was an infested den of thieves and smugglers." Now, which words do you think would be interesting to analyze? Which would have good connotations to talk about? There's actually a couple, but the main one I would look at is the word infested. Okay, because when I read or hear the word infested, I immediately think ew, gross. I think of a gross mental image of disgusting cockroaches and rats crawling around in some old basement or sewer. And to me, the diction of infested connotes a quality of being run down, of neglect. That is one connotation. And the writer chose this word probably to convey this idea that the town is dirty, run down, and disgusting. Another connotation might be corruption, not so much the biological disease associated with infestation, but instead the moral corruption of these thieves and smugglers who work in a morally questionable field where they steal people's things. So a sense of moral corruption is also connoted here. Another interesting thing is, I think, this idea of we usually associate diction of infested with the word infested with animals and insects as opposed to humans. So the writer here, you can say, uses animalistic diction, a certain type of diction, to dehumanize these criminals and make us look at them, as not as humans but as animals, as people who don't have morals, and that's why we look down on these criminals. All right, so let's look at some analysis advice, some practical tips on how to analyze diction in your exams. So when you use the word diction, always try to precede it with an adjective, a descriptive word. For example, instead of writing the diction in infested, you want to say the animalistic diction in infested. And the reason for adding this adjective is because diction by itself is really meaningless unless we specify a particular type of word choice. We always want to be specific in analysis, and here is one particular example of where we need to add an adjective to be as specific as possible. Also, if you get tired of writing diction all the time, you can also replace it with simply word choice or language. Those also are basically interchangeable. So instead of formal diction, you can say formal language. Now let's wrap it up with a final word of warning. The problem is students learn this technique as probably the first technique, and so they start analyzing diction all the time for every technique in an exam, and that's all they analyze, which isn't good because we actually want to analyze a wide range of techniques, and diction is one of the most basic ones. So stop analyzing diction so much and only analyze the best, most interesting word choices. Don't analyze the boring ones.